you, special audience. Now, you've heard lots of people talk today about biotech being one of the foundational technologies that underpin Europe's future. And Europe's ability to mobilize its knowledge was evident during the pandemic when BioNTech, a German company, and in the UK, AstraZeneca, led the world in the development of COVID vaccines. It was an astonishing vertical takeoff. Superheroes dispatching every obstacle left and right. And they showed what could be done. So could the development of mRNA vaccines in particular provide a template for the future and for technical sovereignty in particular? So with me are, well, two people, but I'll introduce the third to cut out any dramas later. So Myriam Mendila on my left is Head of R&D and Chief Scientific Officer of CureVac, and they're the RNA people. Now, how many of you have biological sciences as a background? Hands up. Okay, who's never been anywhere near a science lesson? I'm looking at the lawyer. Oh, she's all right. Okay, so who has never done any science? Anybody or very little? Okay, you are going to be my canary in the coal mine. So if there's a word that you don't understand or a phrase, stick up your hand, and I empower you with my magic sword to speak for everyone in the audience who has no clue either. But okay, okay. So mRNA vaccines are not just about preventive strategies for infectious disease. They're also being used for vaccines that treat cancer. And CureVac is based in Tübingen here in Germany. Then we come to Iordanis, or if I may call you Danos, Iordanis Arzimanoglou, a Greek. He has an international academic background in molecular genetics, but the reason he's such an important addition to this panel is from his previous role as Programme Manager for Health and Biotech at the European Innovation Council. And I think that's given him a bird's eye view of the issues we're discussing today. I'm going to introduce Maria. She's director of the Spanish National Cancer Research Center. Much of her work concerns telomeres. They're the bits of DNA that sit at the end of chromosomes and stop them getting into a tangle. But they also have an important role, it's thought, in aging. And Maria co-founded a company called LifeLength, which is exploiting knowledge about telomeres to provide information about cancer. And LifeLength is based in Madrid. So we're going to start by setting the scene, you two. So, firstly, Iordanis, Danos, how strong is Europe in terms of basic medical science as compared to the US and China? And where are we particularly good?
Europe is strong. Europe is strong in medical research. There are many good, excellent centers around Europe. The weakness is in the translational. We all know that. And what is important to understand, in my view, is we cannot be competitive and good in everything. We need to really create centers of excellence, hubs of excellence. That's the important thing. And that's how you compete internationally. And the reason I'm saying that is because that links to all the other questions like sovereignty, translation, products, business development, all that. So there are many ways that Europe has tried to create excellence with clusters, with hubs, now with the European Innovation Council and many other mechanisms. But the important thing to keep in mind is that you need the whole machinery working in order to produce something to be competitive, and that can only become in targeted niche areas.
Okay, how strong do you think we are?
I couldn't agree more with Iordanis, right? Europe is an excellent hub for medical research, but also, like you asked, basic scientific research. If you look just here merely at the number of scientific publications coming from Europe or contributing from Europe to the global publications worldwide, is about a quarter, 25%, much more than what is coming from the US or other countries. Where we are a little bit weaker compared to the US is in terms of impact of the science that's coming from Europe. And that is mainly driven because of the, I think, much higher investment and funding of US academic institutions and the research they can do, so that their work is often more deeper, more sophisticated, and that's why the work has more impact. Now, I also couldn't agree more with Iordanis that in order to lead, we have to focus on the areas where we can be really, really strong. And just to give you a few examples, and build centers of excellence, but not only then they have to also ensure that these centers of excellence really can connect and work together across Europe to really become competitive with other countries. So just to give you one example, in cancer research, which is a bit my expertise and background, we have investigators and study groups from Europe who have really changed the field through the clinical research they have done together and individually as network groups. So it's not just one center publishing or conducting one clinical trial, but they were networking either at a national level, and then often those networks at national level collaborated with networks in other countries to do large randomized clinical trials that were practice changing around the world, not just Europe, but US, Australia, Asia, everywhere, and that often led to regulatory approvals. It is so difficult to have these collaborations going. And it reminded me of the discussion we had this morning that Europe, unfortunately, is in many areas very fragmented, and that is also true for research, clinical research or basic research. And I believe if we could bundle expertise, bundle forces across the countries, we could be so much stronger and probably easily compete with the impact our research would have in the world.
Okay, before we go on to that, and that's a big topic that we need to discuss, Danos, how about the other areas where we're particularly strong? We're strong in cancer research, we're strong in basic science. Any other particular areas in medical research?
In neurological disorders, there is another good, I wouldn't say we're leading the world, but there are very good scientists. You mentioned before the RNA example, right? In RNA, I call it RNA medicine. It's no longer RNA therapeutics. I think we're doing quite well, but again, it's the problem that people are scattered. And it's difficult to go by the areas generally, and you have to go by centers of excellence. And I know that you need more numbers and more statistics. For instance, the fact that EARC, that's in cancer, but EARC is based in Europe, which is the International Agency for Research on Cancer, and is not based in China or in the US, is not by chance. Although EARC is a global organization with 35 members. Then you have another interesting statistics. I think that would answer directly your question, which is published in Nature by John Hodgson. When they compare the different countries in medical fields, Sweden ranked at the top. And the Americans complained about it. I know that proportionally, I mean, always to the population, right? But so Sweden is ranked at the top. Switzerland is number 2. But among the European Union countries, Sweden is at the top by all the criteria that was based, because this question needs to be answered by certain criteria. You go by citations, you go by publications, there are many things that are.
Okay, so let me ask you another rather provocative question, which is about sovereignty. So is biotech an area where we could or should aim for sovereignty? So actually, I'll ask you too. Do you feel that biotech is an area that we should aim for in sovereignty? Hands up. Oh, the lawyer is not being cautious.
I mean, not being dependent of somebody else.
Yeah. Well, yes, well, we try and... Yes. Okay. Sorry, those of you online will not have heard that, but it was about what really sovereignty means in this area. And I guess actually some of the things that, and this goes to something I know you're passionate about, Danos, which is about you can have a very good research center, you can do translation, but you rely on innovative manufacturing, on innovation in things like reagents, because we have a very good diagnostics industry in Europe, but the reagents are extremely expensive and often sourced from elsewhere, which became a big problem in the pandemic. So I guess you would say that sovereignty, as far as this area is concerned, is more than just the actual science. It's about the manufacturing too.
Correct. Correct. The good thing is, let me start with something really good. The Commission, European Union, announced biotech and biomanufacturing as a strategic priority. There are 3 or 4 of the strategic priorities. That happened March 2024. It happened late, but it did happen. So it's a strategic priority area. It's going to shape up the future. Now, about sovereignty, we heard this morning several discussions. What is really sovereignty here? You don't close the borders. It doesn't mean that you don't interact with the Americans and the Chinese, for God's sake. You exchange many things with them, otherwise you're not somebody who's going to advance in everything. Sovereignty is related to critical stuff. That's why I have all the critical medicines, which is a new initiative. Sovereignty is you want to go from A to D. You can do A to B, and you can do C to D, but you are missing the B to C. If that is critical and you need it, and there is a crisis, there is a pandemic, in that regard, sovereignty is important. You need to be able to find that within Europe because it's strategically important. Otherwise, please don't take it wrong. I mean, in biotech and other areas, we need to interact with the rest of the world if we want to be successful. Now, back to biomanufacturing. This is very important. It's a very good question. I'll give you an example from the European Innovation Council. In biomanufacturing, we have a group of elite projects working in biomanufacturing since 2021, meaning we did the targeted call in 2022. That is before Biden administration invested $2 billion in biomanufacturing, most of that going to cell and gene therapy ATMPs. That is before Bayern invested $250 million in California for a biomanufacturing plant. That is before Novo Nordisk Foundation, the biggest foundation in the world. The gross domestic product is bigger than Denmark, over 600 billion. They launched a unit, cell therapy manufacturing unit, outside Copenhagen of 160 billion. And the European Innovation Council had an elite projects funded with 50 million, and I guess nobody in the room knows that, because we are very bad in communication. And this is now up and running, working and producing really critical stuff in as our moderator said, in the cell, in improving only the manufacturing, not doing everything in cell and gene therapy, just improving the delivery system in manufacturing or improving, the systems that we use in cell manufacturing.
Maria, welcome. I know you've had a miserable time in traffic, but don't fret. There's plenty of time still left to talk about this. So I was asking about issues of sovereignty, but one thing that you might have an opinion about is why is Europe lagging behind the States in particular in terms of translating medical science breakthroughs into commercial applications?
I don't know if this is on. Well,
yes.
First of all, sorry for the delay. It's a pleasure to be here. So, in my opinion, I think always innovation comes from breakthroughs. So, from basic research breakthroughs, it's very important that we have here the talent and the possibility of fostering really breakthrough science, because it's always from breakthrough science when it comes the opportunities for patenting, for making agreements with industry, for making new companies and bringing this to the market. So if I have to highlight something, I would say that the more funding and the more ability we have in Europe to bring talent, the scientists that are really making the breakthrough discoveries in science, if we are able to retain this talent or to bring this talent to Europe, is this breakthrough basic research the one that is always bringing or having more chances to bring innovation and of course, then there are troubles, right? I mean, it's not so easy. You may have here breakthrough discoveries in Europe and the best scientists that you can imagine, but then you also need to sort of speed up going from these discoveries to the market. And I can tell you some strategies. For instance, I'm the director of the Cancer Center in Spain. It's one of the top cancer centers in Europe in the rankings. And we have something very unique. We have a drug discovery program. So we have basic science, but then we don't wait for the industry to knock on our doors to say, I like what you have discovered or published in this or that journal. We can internally take this target, and thanks to this drug discovery program with chemists, we can really advance to products that may be more attractive for industry. So that's something also that could be done. But I would always, I'm always for the talent and for the ability to do breakthrough science, because this always is what works, what brings new opportunities.
So, Myriam, breakthrough science, but it's not enough, is it? What do we, and what's tripping us up compared?
No, exactly. So I do agree, and as we said at the beginning, we do have brilliant scientists and clinical researchers in Europe, and that are, sort of like also very competitive and can be competitive with other countries. But we just discussed it in the other session. So if you have an invention, an idea, to make it an innovation, you need to have funding, right? And that's the first hurdle to take. Find somebody who likes your idea, especially in science and in translational science. Find somebody who likes your idea and invest the money that you can do the research and discovery work that's needed. Super difficult in Europe, much easier in the United States and in other areas where the governments are funding, right? So, but let's say you are successful and took that first hurdle. Second hurdle is you want to do your discovery work, preclinical studies, which requires animal studies. You need to get regulatory approval. It takes a lot, you have to fulfill a lot of requirements, regulations, you need to get approval, you have to wait. So it's taking time. Then let's say you're successful, you've done your discovery, preclinical development, you have your clinical candidate and would like to start a clinical trial. You need to consult with the health authorities to get input into the program. In Europe, you have to wait months until you get an appointment with the health authorities. In the US, 30 days. We just at a program that we wanted to discuss, FDA meeting happened in May. Simultaneous scientific national advice with the EU regulators happens in October. We contacted both authorities at the same time. So it's long. Let's say then you have that, you've written your protocol, you want to submit a clinical trial application to get the authorization to start the trial. FDA, IND review, 30 days, you can start. Europe, the last trial we did, I think it took us 5 months to be able to open the trial. So again, Europe is complex and long, and those are a little bit the challenges we are facing when you are asking sort of like why scientific breakthrough is not sort of like competitive in making the path through. You have to overcome way more hurdles in Europe because of the complex regulations, because of that risk aversity, because of the limited funding. And that is basically giving us a little bit of a disadvantage and challenge that we hopefully can address in the future.
And we've become very risk adverse, haven't we? Thank you. We've become very risk averse because, I mean, and every form that we have to fill in has all these extraordinary length of questions. I was just saying that I'm a sole trader. I was asked when I wanted to have a government contract what my anti-slavery policy was. And I said on a Friday night, I always poured myself a very large gin and tonic and tried not to work beyond 9 o'clock. But anyway, these are the kind of things which have got beyond parody, and they are extraordinarily difficult. So how do we leap beyond that? Because the whole situation with COVID showed us one thing, is that we can do this. I mean, I know we shelved virtually everything else, and we did things in parallel rather than in sequence, but, you know, we can do it.
Yes, in Cambridge, yeah. One door is AstraZeneca, and then is the university, so you interact, right? Let's say that I agree that funding is a very big difference between the States and Europe. We've heard that several times, the VC funding 5 times, 3 times, and regulation. This is well known, has been said several times. Suppose that somebody fixed that the next day. After having fixed that, would we still be, you know, competing and would be the front runners of the game? In my opinion, no, because there are other reasons why we're lagging behind. We're not very effective, not efficient, very effective. What I mean by that is that we don't work systematically, and that's the experience from EIC.
Yeah, just to explain to people who don't know what the EIC does.
I will.
Yeah.
But just say that What it means here is that people are scattered. That's well said in Draghi's report. People work isolated, and they don't have the incentives and the reason to work together unless it is to get together to apply for funding. So we need the solution to that, and that's very critical. So the experience of the European Innovation Council, which is unlike every other European institution, the first organization who issued targeted goals in targeted niche areas. These goals are designed by a senior expert called program manager or program director internally in health in different sectors. It goes through a long process, and then these goals gives money to selected projects around Europe. These projects are consortia from the industry and the university. It's not enough to get together. It's not enough to sit with them. It's not enough to drink coffee. It's not enough to say we're going to work together. You need something more, and the more is what I'm trying to tell you here. And this works in the US. When I work there, it works really because they are results-oriented, not because it has been designed as well. They are also experimenting on that, but they go after the results. The group of projects that are managed by EIC are selected elite projects from Europe, and Spain, yes, is doing very well, that are managed by somebody who comes from the same field, and is a contractual obligation that they work together for 3 years. What do you achieve by that is that they start working together thinking of all the IPs and all the issues that we discussed in a previous panel. They start not really caring about that when they see the added value. That's also said in Draghi's report. It says we need more added value. But to achieve more added value, you want to achieve something with an instrument that gives you an impact which is higher than the sum of the impact of the individual projects. That, for me, is key, and that is the answer for Europe according to the EIC experience in different sectors. You select the projects based on the consideration I've been described in the call. I want manufacturing, I want mRNA, I want that and that and that, after a consensus. And then you have really elite projects that they don't fit into that out. You make the selection, and then you move with them, and you work with them for 3 years, like being in a big company where you have different research lines. This has been tried by nobody, but it's, to the best of my knowledge, only by the European Innovation Council, the last 4 years, and there are many, we call them portfolios, challenge-based groups, coherent groups of projects that are working and building the critical mass, and based on the critical mass, we'll build the hubs of excellence, and you will compete with that.
Can I just, because I do agree with that, and we were participating in a few of these programs, and I would love to hear what was your sort of like impression in terms of outcomes and how long it took.
The challenge-based goals. Is that what you're asking?
Well, there were also like working groups found, so because you had to sort of like submit projects, request
yes.
funding, right? And then you got the funding, the projects were kicked off, and we had a couple of meetings always and tried to move it forward. But I'm just curious, did you see the outcome of those projects, and what was it faster than if you had individual efforts?
There are portfolios, group of projects right now in the second or third year of operation. And they are producing, we have the low-hanging fruits that we're getting. They work on their own, putting the IP strategy and all the other concepts aside, and they are creating, they have been funded for something, and then they get together and they agree, and you can participate there, on something new, a new research line of short duration, targeted. That resembles to what a successful big corporation does, but is really different. So they agreed doing that. And they have to deliver in 3 years. And this is an addition that was missing from the system. And that is a bit and bit and bit that, for instance, in manufacturing, we want to improve that step, we want to improve the other step, we want to do the sum. And then when the regulators come, they learn from that. So, and they interact with the regulators.
So I just wanted to come back to something that you mentioned before, that thing about value. So what is value? Because it becomes really very difficult, and there's a big difference between the US and here, and it relates to reimbursement. So they reimburse, they pay a lot of money for medicines. There are lots of issues about reimbursement, and if you haven't got a market, and moreover, with things like cell and gene therapies, you don't know what the value is. I mean, is the value 5 years later when you discover that somebody's being cured of a condition, and that's the point at which you say this drug is worth X? Or is the value in whether it's a lifelong cure? I mean, so how do we deal with that issue of value? And also this perception, I think, that a lot of the public out there see these kind of therapies simply as being about huge sums of money for drug companies.
It's a great question. What is value here? Value is really to be able to address the unmet medical needs in a specific area in a targeted fashion. That's what we did. Money were given to cell and gene therapy before EIC. Somebody said earlier they were thinly distributed everywhere to cover, there are many people in the area, but what made the difference here is that we targeted a specific area within cell and gene therapy. That's the key. You select, and then you manage these projects. And value is created because the outcome of that are specific considerations that have been thought through previously. To give you an example, for 30 years, cell and gene therapy is facing the same problems, which have to do with manufacturing problems, have to do with toxicity, have to do with vectors, and the clinical administration. When we designed the call, and the call wanted to be for early stage research, not really clinical, we said the two of these challenges belong to the clinical development, so we need to focus on the one that belongs to the preclinical development, again targeted. And we need to do something around that. So that's how you create value. There's going to be another call thinking about the problem of the administration and toxicity, clinical. We have also funding at the later stages of clinical development. If you don't go by that in a systematic approach, then the value will be compromised and the impact will be compromised.
Maria.
Yeah, I don't know so much about the value, how to assign I'm a basic scientist, but I can tell about my experience. We have now a new company called Telomere Therapeutics. It's a gene therapy for degenerative diseases like pulmonary fibrosis, etc. I must say that, for instance, I could say that I was sort of disappointed when I applied to I had 2 ERCs. These are the top grants from Europe for basic research. But I never got an ERC for developing this treatment, right? This was considered either that it was not going to work or too risky. In a way, I think this is a criticism for Europe. We have to be more daring. We have to be funding things that are really, what I was saying before, really something that is is a breakthrough if it works, not something that you have some warranty that is going to work. So that has been my experience. Also, my experience has been that sometimes, even if you are in Europe and you have made some discovery that could be potentially interesting, because it could potentially serve to cure diseases that we don't know how to cure right now, and this could be really a breakthrough. Very rarely I had the interest of, let's say European pharma companies. So we have had companies from the US coming to knock on our door to say we want to contribute to developing this.
American companies are very interested in longevity, of course, which is your field.
Yeah, well, this is something that when you mentioned COVID and what happened to solve this problem, I don't think it's really solved, but it has been an example of how to do things. I think there are now other things that we should probably have similar strategies, like cancer, like all the diseases associated with aging. For one reason, because these diseases are going to duplicate the incidence in a few years from now. This is due to demographic aging. We are suffering demographic aging, means that we are going to have more people above 65. In Spain, Italy, I think, are examples. The population above 65 will be a third of the population, and this is an age where you will have double the cases of cancer, double the cases of Alzheimer, and we don't have a cure for these diseases associated with aging. So this means that a real focus I think, for Europe should be to understand aging at the molecular level, and we understand quite a lot about that already, and there are very good groups in Europe, but to try to bring these discoveries to the market first, not to wait for the US to be first, because we have sometimes here the groups that are leading these things, and in my can say in my case, for instance, in my group that we work on telomeres and all that, are the companies from the US the ones that are coming to knock on my door, not European companies. And when I asked 1 year if to fund this, it was denied.
So
somehow Europe lacks a little bit of daring.
Yeah, I agree with that. Maybe to build on this, this shows, right, that the definition of value leads to challenges, right?
Yeah.
So, and it really depends on who you ask. If you think about, biotech companies, you usually develop medicines that should bring value to patients. If you ask the patient...
And notice, she's talking about value. Patients think of value in a completely different way.
Completely different ways. Let's take cancer again, right? You ask a patient, what do you expect from your cancer treatment? And even there, patients individually give you a different answer for what they consider value. But usually the majority, I would like my life to be prolonged, and I want to have that prolonged life with good quality of life. Now, when you ask maybe not even regulators, they have a different definition of value. And then if you ask payers, it's even another definition of value. And the situation becomes then that absurd that as a developer, you design a clinical trial with an endpoint to show a benefit for patients that is maybe meeting patient expectations. The regulators might accept it and approve that product in Europe, but then the payers in the different countries may say, your definition of value is not ours. We need you to do another study with new endpoints. And every country has then, again, other definitions. So the value you need to show in Germany is a different one than what you have to show in Spain or in Italy. And you're sitting there and have a global trial, let's say with 1,000 patients or even more, and you have to do a trial in Germany just for the payers, maybe another trial in Italy or in France. So it's just to tell you that this is a disadvantage for Europe, and companies are sort of like, it's a challenge for them when you want to bring trials into Europe, but they know it's a complex system and they may not get reimbursed. That's why then they may go to other markets first.
Yeah, exactly. So do we need to harmonize regulatory frameworks in Europe? Let's find out from the audience first. Yes or no? Yeah, well, they've said it, so obviously it's right. Ria, yes?
Yes, of course.
And
the regulatory framework actually is already harmonized, but the reimbursement and health technology assessment is not yet harmonized, but there's intention. But even then, if it's harmonized, still every country has the right to interpret and decide what is right for the country. So I would say, yes, we need to do it, but the intentions are there, and still you have given so much autonomy to the countries that the diversity and fragmentation still exists.
Yes, and I know that on the clinical trials directive, I know that the UK got into a lot of trouble because we kind of gold-plated all the regulations and made them so difficult, and then people started to complain about Europe. But then they always complain about Europe, but we will be back. Can I just say that we're coming back?
The researchers, the investigators are still working with the local agencies. So that's one of the problems that kind of hinders the progression of EMA, being the catalyst of all of that. Secondly, when you are dealing with emerging technologies that you want to do, breakthroughs and all that, EMA needs to be trained as well. How are they supposed to know where to regulate and what to? So what we did at EIC and other organizations hopefully do that, interact with the people. EMA, when we're doing something in cancer, we invite people that have cancer expertise from EMA, and we did that in our summit, and they interacted with the grantees, those that they got money from us. And they got a lot of advice where to regulate, what is important, where is the challenge we said before. So one thing is that. And the other thing is that also the investigators that have been funded, they wanted to know from EMA where to focus, how to, really set up their story and how to do about the next step. So it's very easy to say it's harmonized, but has it been implemented? Not yet. And this is really a process, a currently ongoing process, which is extremely important. And it has to be also by discipline and by area. Again, you need to bring the people who have the expertise and they understand the technology. I'd just like to make very quickly a distinction between ERC and EIC. There are different organizations for the ERC funds, excellent research. EIC also, but EIC also funds translational, level of research, if we go by what is called technology readiness, and also funds startups and scaling up companies. It's the only one in Europe. There are certain uniquenesses associated with EIC. You asked me before and I didn't send them. First of all is the selection based on how you fit best in a portfolio. A panel of experts does that and can leave somebody who is excellent outside because it doesn't fit the purpose. Nobody else does that. It has open calls, as everybody else, but it has the targeted challenge-based calls based on unmet medical needs, designed by experts. Another uniqueness is the EIC fund, which is a venture arm of EIC. So EIC provides up to 50 million per single company. A single European company can apply and get grant and private equity funding against financing, against private equity, up to 15 million. This has been, with lots of criticism, successful to the extent that American companies, they want to establish a legal entity in Europe in order to apply for money from EIC. That has never happened before. We always looked at America, but you know, this is like a little bit of game changer right now, and we'll see how it works in the end.
Okay, let me ask you some questions, because I know we've got some early career academics. Have any of you ever been asked to go to talk to policymakers or regulators about the research that you do? No. Mrs. Lawyer over there, has anyone ever come to you to explain science in a particular area?
That's a very broad question. When I was at law school, some 135 years ago, I took special courses in science.
Okay, so there are special, but there is a real need for regulators to understand. This lady at the back, tell me. Hang on, just wait for the microphone. Yeah. That's all so that you who are watching streaming can hear.
So actually, I would like to take up your point, because this was actually also the point I would like to make, that is also about mindset. And I think there's a difference in mindset, at least between the US and, I would say, Germany. Yeah? And I think it's very important. You also need a translational mindset. And this refers to your point, yeah, that it's not only as a scientist, yeah, to be interested in, in science, yeah, but also to have some idea how to engage with society, so science communication, but also how to engage with industry. So actually not only to make, or to publish a very good publication, but also really kind of to patent. And this is a difference in the mindset, yeah. So already 20 years ago, there's a difference in the education in the US. So you have to educate young students and young academics in science communication and in industrial kind of skills. Okay,
I know I've trained 3,000 early career academics how to speak to policymakers, and some of them still do. Myriam, how do we deal with that?
How do we? Well, first of all, I couldn't agree more with what was said. What was just said. The mindset in Europe and in Germany is very different, because in the US they have this entrepreneurial mindset. If they have an invention, innovation, they find a patent and spin-off companies from university is sort of like the norm. I think we don't educate our students, right, and our scientists, that this is also a career in science, that you can basically make a discovery, an invention, a patent, and form a company and be successful. The thinking right now in academia is write papers. You're measured, or your success and your career depends on how many scientific papers you publish every year and what's their scientific impact. And that's kind of sort of like the education. To your question, how can we go about it? I think you need to build it into the curricula of the universities, that if somebody's studying medicine, research, biology, genomics, that they basically are educated that the work that they can do, they could be academic career, but there could be also a career in biotech industry.
And also to understand that actually some scientists are not suited to that approach. But, they should know when to turn it over to somebody else.
I think it's not that there are scientists that are not suited. I think it's a matter of culture in the institutions. Yes. I was trained in the US, for instance. I was in Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory, and there I saw people, funding companies, and some of them becoming even millionaires. and to me, being the director of the Spanish National Cancer Center, that was very clear since the beginning. And this is part of our culture. And I spin off 2 companies from my lab, and many people have spin out companies. It's not a matter of being European or American. It's a matter of having seen that, giving value to that, and giving value to that in your institution. So we should do that really. I mean, it could be supported by the governments, of course, and by the European Commission, but we have also to bring it to our own institutions, to our own decision-making, and it's something that I think there is no excuse. I mean, this is something that can be done. Of course, you need to have a team at the institution that is able to do this. But it's not that difficult, and this is happening every day in the US.
So one of the things that we are charged with talking about in this session is about breakthroughs. Now, we were actually banned on the BBC from talking about breakthroughs because, in general, they weren't breakthroughs. But it is a kind of mindset that politicians have, and we've seen it most recently. I mean, Maria Draghi calls for what he calls a DARPA-like. So DARPA was the Defense Advanced Research Agency, and it came up with all sorts of things like no, it wasn't non-stick pans. No, it was all the kind of satellite technology. It was all sorts of really major things, that a GPS, for instance. So there is a feeling amongst politicians that we need this kind of breakthrough academy, to call it by a silly name, but that's what they want. And in the UK, we have something called ARIA, which is supposed to be like that. Is that kind of approach going to work? And is that the approach that Europe should take in developing breakthroughs which might lead to technological sovereignty? So I suspect you think the answer is no.
Just by launching an institution, it won't work.
Yeah.
You have ARPAs, you have DARPA, you have ARIA in the UK, and you have other organizations. The important thing is what they do. What they do, I believe, is useful, but it again starts with defining the challenges. In order to get to breakthroughs, you need to know the challenges, and then you have to have some people systematically working against those challenges. If you do not define the challenges and you just spread money around thinly, just for the status quo to remain and make people happy and for their egos, you won't get to breakthroughs. Breakthrough is associated, in my understanding, with an unmet need in different sectors. We're talking here about medicine, unmet medical need. Now, the role of these organizations, which includes EIC for Europe, right? That's the European Innovation Council that has a health and biotech sector, is to be able, first of all, to define some challenges, not everything, and then put people systematically working against that in order to really enhance the possibility to get to breakthroughs. Nothing wrong with the breakthroughs, but you need to work in order to get to those breakthroughs. People talk about unicorns, talk about... At the end, I believe...
But they don't talk about the dead unicorns. In other words, there's an awful lot of things littered along the way that never turned into a unicorn.
I would never measure it by the unicorns. I would never measure by I would measure it by the centers of excellence that we said in the beginning, that they have the power, the flexibility, they can adapt and give you a new solution. That is very important. I'll give you one example of one call that we have. For the next pandemic, HERA was launched a new agency in the Commission dealing with pandemic preparedness, and we designed a call about dealing with broad spectrum monoclonal antibodies for the next pandemic. What does it mean? That if you have new variants of high concern, you have two options: either to improve your manufacturing, and if the new variant of a new virus of high concern, not there are many variants, to be able to address that and develop something, not a vaccine here, not a prophylactic, but a therapeutic, in less than 100 days to be effective. Or there is another option, that's how the challenge is, to go for developing broad-spectrum monoclonal antibodies. We know a lot about monoclonal antibodies, but we want this broad spectrum. So those are the challenges. You make the call, and the chance, the likelihood to have a breakthrough from the critical mass of people working for the development of broad-spectrum antibodies is higher than not having it. So in that regard, these institutions play a role.
And the history is not encouraging, is it? Moonshots against cancer have not actually produced much. I mean, there was a lot of money, but and I just wonder, how about, what's your thoughts on this? Questions on this? Who thinks we should be having this kind of moonshot breakthrough work? This man has a thought bubble above his head. Give him the microphone immediately.
Well, thanks for spotting the thought bubble. The question regarding breakthroughs is, maybe we misappreciate how young biology and biomedical research is as a science when we talk about these breakthroughs. About 80% of genes in the human genome have no known function. We do not know what they do. This is a huge untapped potential, which is pure basic research. Like 35% of all FDA-approved drugs target so-called G-protein coupled receptors. About half of them, we have no idea what binds to them. But in any single proposal for breakthroughs, you're asked about what is the added value to society. We don't know. We don't know what the gene does. So like, there's a huge need for blue sky projects, and we should acknowledge that for a lot of these things, like, we don't know what the outcome is.
We don't know what the outcome is. Lady behind you.
Yeah, it's a bit in line with what you say. You talk from the very beginning about translational and about excellence. But when you build programs on excellence, you destroy small laboratories, a small way of thinking that maybe will go to a breakthrough. And when everything needs to be translational, and my research is completely translational, but I realize that when all the projects needs to be translational, then you...
Yeah, and university vice chancellors are obsessed with translational. So, Myriam.
Yes and no. I mean, again, the question is, what do you define at breakthrough? And you mentioned the Cancer Moonshot program, where you said a lot of money has been poured, but it hasn't been successful. But this program has a goal. That's to cure cancer, right? And you will not be able to do that in 10 years. And so what they are doing, coming also to your, they poured the sort of like leading centers in the country and even around the world together, build a genomic database, and will analyze and understand the genes, right, that contribute to cancer, and on the basis of that will develop different treatment modalities, because we don't know what will cure cancer. I do believe it's going to be immunotherapy, but there will be other, people having different beliefs, and the beauty is you have your overarching goal where all of the researchers bundle their forces and go for it, but they try different things in order for this to work. So I think if you set it up right with a focus and you say that's our goal, and you give the liberty to have blue skies thinking and experiment in different ways, it could work, but you need money. And that's, again, where I believe in Europe we are weak. That's why we have these fragmented efforts. Every university is doing their little thing. They don't have the exchange because it's competition, right? We don't share what we know because we want to be first and we don't want to steal from each other. So that's why I do believe if you had these BARDA-like, NIH-like organizations with clear priorities and then significant funding and bringing people together, it could make a difference.
Support in the audience for this? Hands up if you support that kind of approach. Okay. Maria.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on cancer. Of course, cancer is not a single disease. There are as many cancer as patients with cancer. We know it's not an easy thing to achieve, but I think there have been a lot of breakthroughs. There are breakthroughs every day, and we have new treatments. Immunotherapy has been one big advance, but I think now with artificial intelligence and having programs to have the structure of proteins that much faster and everything. I think we are going to see many more breakthroughs in cancer research. But keep in mind that cancer is not a single disease. It's a very complex disease.
Okay.
Because it's many different diseases. Every individual has a different set of mutations in their cancers, and therefore you may not expect that a single treatment is going to cure every cancer. So
no, but the point is to achieve a cure, right? And a cure for one cancer, let's say melanoma, could be a different achieved in different ways than another cure. The problem, the thing is that it just has to be one goal that's clear for everyone, and then you basically empower and connect the people.
And the other issue, of course, is that politicians may think they may give a lot of money to something and say, this is blue skies, you don't have to tell us what you're doing, you just have to go and do it. If you believe that a politician does not want a breakthrough by Tuesday tea time with the money that they've given, and certainly before the next election, then you are misunderstanding politicians. And I think that that's an issue that politicians will always be tempted to meddle.
Actually, it was Richard Nixon, the one that said that Kennedy reached the moon and he wanted to cure cancer. It was in the 70s. We still haven't cured cancer. It's not an easy thing, and of course Nixon didn't see it.
So I'm going to poke you all with a stick, and I'm going to say, but you've already given a bit of an answer, is where you think the big breakthroughs will take place in Europe. And you've said you think it's immunotherapy.
I hope it's going to be immunotherapy in Europe. The question is about Europe, right? And let me think about that, right? But I do hope that we will be able, out of Europe, through a cancer vaccine, with the sort of like leadership we have, to again cure more cancers in the future. That's a hope.
And we always have to remember, don't we, Danos, that actually breakthroughs often happen because there's a sudden change in technology. So, you know, genome, the kind of project, you know, with sort of 100,000 human genomes and associated records and all those kind of things, that was not possible before we had high-speed computing. And so, and the price of a whole genome sequencing also had to fall dramatically. So sometimes it's the technological advance, and that's why you're talking about the whole piece, that actually makes those things possible. So now I'm going to poke you with my stick. Where do you think we're going to be making real breakthroughs in Europe?
To name something a breakthrough is something you don't know when it's happening. It's only understood later on.
Yeah.
Because you cannot say, I'm going to have a breakthrough tomorrow, and you're going to have it. No way. Also, some definition, what you said, I'm a clinical geneticist by training, so yes, we still don't know what most of the genes do, and the regulatory sequence is all known. There was a period where we were saying this is a sporadic case and genetic case. We were saying, I'm sorry, nonsense, because the sporadic case is the unknown genetic background, the unknown genetic makeup of these persons. That's what we learned. The first predisposition gene in cancer was considered, you know, we solved the BRCA1, and now there are 45 doing this. So all this is correct. But to answer also what the lady said before, most of the money are still given to open calls, meaning we don't kill the basic research. Nobody can do that, and that's how to be devastating, and please don't think that way. But if you don't really target, and that's the answer, you target certain areas that have priority, then you don't behave as a scientist, developer, innovator, country, European Union responsibly, because you have to set priorities.
Okay, so I'm going to change my question to you. Where are the promising areas that might lead to breakthroughs? I mean, I'm guessing you might say cell and gene-based therapies.
It is. I think RNA medicine is going to be a very big area that's going to attract a lot of attention. Why? Because some of the solutions that come through RNA medicine, not only RNA therapeutics and RNA diagnostics, they're going to work, I'm thinking, and that's my assessment as a scientist and manager of science, across diseases. We're going to be successful, and we need to have solutions, including the technological advances that you said, in areas where they can give us, it's like the technology platforms are key, which are adaptable and can give you solutions that can be used to a lesser or to a greater extent to different areas. As you said before, cancers. You cannot go and say rheumatoid arthritis, only that. Or you cannot say one particular, there are 150 dementias. I can be in the 136 dementia syndrome or the other. There is no way you can say that. But if you focus on certain technological platforms, for instance, mRNA was known for many years. Nobody cared about that. mRNA platform did not receive funding. It was left as something, who cares about that? And then now, everybody knows about it, and people. There is something else. There is a new, interesting molecule, I'm sorry for those around the group, which is called tRNA, and which is another approach, that's my personal guess, I'd just like to share with you, might be a huge breakthrough for the humanity, because it can really, if it works, this approach, there's a company founded by Flagship Ventures, and we have made the call where we include tRNA as a molecule, and nobody applied. Nobody applied, much to our disappointment, because tRNA is something that if it works, it can really, we are able to really work at the protein levels and create drugs across diseases.
So I've just interviewed the winners of the Kavli Prize in Oslo, and the thing that struck me was every single one of those Kavli Prize winners had gone into an area of science where there were only half a dozen papers. And they were, they were setting the field and creating a whole new discipline. But that requires great courage, as well as support from funders, and this collaborative approach where you have people thinking about everything from right through this, the whole route of discovery.
I shouldn't forget to say, I'm sorry for interrupting you, but the stem cell area is a very critical also area that we are very strong in Europe, and we're advancing a lot.
Maria, I'm guessing in aging.
Yes, sorry I insist, but we have to think that aging is the cause of many of the diseases that kill us. Those that are not infectious diseases, and the rest of the diseases, all the degenerative diseases, the origin is aging. So only if we understand aging and we are able to prevent or treat with the knowledge of aging these diseases, we will be able to cure them. We have to think that we are not able to cure any single degenerative disease. And this is in spite of all the millions of euros and dollars that have gone into Alzheimer's. And this is because, to me, the cause of that is because we have wrongly put our attention, or we have not put our attention in the origin of these diseases with this molecular aging. Now we know not everything, but we know quite a lot about aging, and we should target those things.
And can I point you to a proper breakthrough that's happened in Europe, which is the incretin-based therapies? You'll know them better as Wegovy and Mounjaro, tirzepatide and semaglutide, which, yes, touted by the media as being weight loss, but actually astonishing effects in reducing heart failure, having a neuroprotective effect, addictions, just an astonishing range. So these things can occur. They can occur in Europe. They can be of benefit to the whole world. And there is no reason that Europe could not go there. But we have to be bold, we have to collaborate, we have to think about the regulatory frameworks, and we will get there. So no gloom here on this panel, and I'm going to thank all of you, because what a splendid audience you are, obviously, you're top quality, and thank you to our panel.